please welcome to Hollywood Headliners, Paul Dergarabedian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul is a senior media analyst for a company called Rentrak, which is a global media strategy business, which means they're teaching guys in Italy how to make movies? Or?
Exactly.
Is this going to be a good summer for movies, Paul?
I think it's going to be, I'm looking at more as a warm-up for 2015. When we look, next year, the comparisons to this year, I think a lot of the weekends are going to be up, because we're going to have the next Avengers movie, the next James Bond, the next Star Wars.
This is in 2015?
This is in 2015. I'm going way ahead. I love to look way ahead.
Let's go back to this word sequels.
Yeah.
Where did that start? And kind of when did that start?
Wow, I mean, if you go way back, you could say Bride of Frankenstein or something.
Yeah.
Frankenstein, then the Bride of Frankenstein.
Right.
And then you had serialized, episodic, back in the 30s and 40s.
The Black Whip and all
those old shows, even on radio, things were serialized to create content that people could
But in the
recognize.
big-time movie business.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what would be...
Star Wars?
Well, remember Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, Godfather, right.
Probably the only sequel that surpassed.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, both in terms of quality and all, and the budget was much higher, and it was an amazing film. But we used to call those sequels. Now we call those brands. Everything's branded entertainment, whether it be a sequel or even a universe. Like Marvel is a brand, and within that universe are all these different characters that can have their own movies, their own spin-offs and all that. The only thing I'm seeing, though, or something I've seen over the years, where you don't necessarily need a sequel, is with R-rated comedies for some reason. Like The 40-Year-Old Virgin was a brand new thing, and it did really well. Wedding Crashers, same thing.
Right.
Pitch Perfect.
Yeah,
End of the
Perfect.
What movie is going to be the summer winner?
Well, if we're talking
And
about
why?
box office, I mean, Spider-Man's definitely off to a good start, but I think X-Men Days of Future Past, which, by the way, I believe is a Moody Blues, one of my favorite Moody Blues albums, just as an aside.
Well, that's good. Jeez, you learn a lot on this show.
X-Men I love. I really loved what Matthew Vaughn did with the First Class, X-Men First Class, with all the characters in their younger days.
Right.
And I think this one is going to do incredibly well. I've seen Godzilla.
Yeah.
And, terrific cast in the movie. And I think this is a movie that will play very well internationally. I mean, when they're greenlighting movies now, they're looking at how this will play to the worldwide audience. And Godzilla is a brand, I mean, obviously, that everyone knows. And there is some pathos in the movie. They try to get some character development into these movies, which what the Marvel movies have done is set the bar so high on these big budget action films.
Yeah, right. The CGI, everything is just so unbelievable.
Everything's so high, but they also put a lot of effort into the script, so that it's not just about the characters.
It's sort of Jaws-like in that you don't
Godzilla?
Because you don't see the creature for
lot.
quite a while.
That's really
true. You feel it, you hear it.
You have to wait a while before you really get the full Godzilla.
Yeah. Who are the important countries internationally?
Well, China is a huge emerging growth market. I mean, the box office over the last 5 years, 30% a year, going up. By the end of the decade, they will surpass China. The China marketplace for movies will surpass North American box office.
That's why you'll see front page stories in the trades or online in the trades about movies that have been approved or not approved to be viewed in China. It's a big deal. It can take
and they'll even modify the movie.
Right.
So they will modify the movie.
Yeah.
What other countries are important?
Well, India is obviously just taking off as well, and particularly homegrown homegrown movies do very, very well. And also Bollywood films in North America do really well. Sometimes they're in 80 theaters and they're in the top 10.
Yeah.
Because the theaters are full of
Packed,
people wanting to see those films.
Average.
You got it, Rob.
Yeah. So the studios now are trying to figure out, when should we take our biggest movie and put it in? When does it open?
Yeah.
And how do they determine that? And what does the local theater guy in my little town, does he have any say in this?
Not really. It's all set by the studios. It's like a giant chessboard, and they try and figure out what release date to go on. Now, Lionsgate with the first Hunger Games movie, said, let's put this movie out in March. Now, March is not a hotbed of $150 million opening weekends, but guess what they got? $152 million opening weekend, because they went at a time that was much less competitive. And it's funny, I look back, and one of the first movies to go earlier in May than Memorial Weekend, which has always been the traditional start of summer, was Lethal Weapon 3. And it made like $40 million, and people were like, wow, how did that happen? And then The Mummy and The Mummy Returns did very well in the first weekend in May, and it started shifting. And The Mummy Returns made $68 million in its opening weekend, the first weekend in May in 2001. And do you remember a year later, the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire was the first film to open with over $100 million, 114. I used to know the whole number, but it's 140, very famous.
733.
Cementing that franchise forever.
And it cemented the franchise, and it cemented that date as a go-to date. And the top 2 opening weekends of all time come from the first weekend in May. Wow. The Avengers, Marvel's The Avengers, which had $207.4 million in its opening weekend. That was insane. I remember that weekend, that a film could do that in just North America in 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then last year, kicking off the summer, was Iron Man 3, and that opened with about $174 million.
I love going to the movies. I love seeing a good movie, and it's just really fun to get into the summer season. But Paul has told us that that's starting in March now, so I'm 2 months late.
Or January. The studios would love that. And the interesting thing, too, is that 40% of the total year's box office comes from the 18 weeks of summer.
Wow.
And we've got 12 sequels this summer. We had 25 sequels last year.
18 weeks of summer.
18 weeks of summer.
Only in Hollywood.
That's right.
Did a season, a 3-month season become 18 weeks.
I
It's
can't
math. It's Hollywood math.
It's Hollywood math.
You've gotten those residuals. Oh, no, I guess you didn't.
I guess not. You're looking at the wrong
Right.
guy. Who's going to be the big male star that will emerge from the summer movies this year?
This might surprise
Prediction.
you.
I want a prediction.
This might surprise you. I think Seth MacFarlane is
The West?
A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Really?
And I think this guy, I mean, you look at Ted, and he voiced Ted. He wasn't in the movie, but he directed and wrote it. I've seen these trailers, and I mean, I'm a huge fan of Blazing Saddles, and I'm hoping this can take on that very highbrow mantle.
Hey, Paul, thank you very much for being on
Thank you,
Hollywood Hill.
Andy.
This is really great. Boy, do you know your stuff. Will you come back again?
Absolutely.
And I kept a little scorecard here, and I can, I'll be able to tell, where you screwed up and where you really embarrassed yourself. No, Paul, I really appreciate it. Thanks,
Thanks,
you very,
Rob.
very much.
Great to be here.